Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Deltarune Theory video. I'm in the theory now. I'm in it. I don't know, I just decided to do this. It does lead to a couple awkward slide layouts because I didn't originally make this slideshow with that in mind, but whatever, we're here. Before we begin, I have to be a little bit pedantic and say this is a video about symbolism, because I know a bunch of people are gonna come in here and they're gonna say, "You idiot, the flowers are a representation of the 7 human souls from Undertale." And I do know that, alright? I'm not unaware. The point of this video is to read into these characters and see if they can tell us more about the world of Deltarune. So, just so we're all clear, I'm not literally saying that Flowery is Rudy, just that Flowery tells us something about Asgore's relationship with Rudy. Because I don't think it's that strange of an idea, or that unfounded of an idea, that Flowery and Rudy could be parallels to each other in some way. I mean, not only does Flowery call Asgore his old college roommate, which is literally impossible considering he's a flower, but that is the role that Rudy played in Asgore's life. But he also calls himself your dad's best friend, which Rudy is, and he dies in the end. And the interesting thing about Flowery and Rudy being parallels in this way is that we know from the flashback in Chapter 3 that Rudy was one of the last members of the family to stick around after everyone started leaving post-Dess's disappearance. Even Asgore leaves the family before Rudy leaves them, right? And so the idea that Flowery is sort of a force that is trying to keep all the flowers together, and also Asgore, sort of tracks with Rudy's personality. Something else that tracks with Rudy's personality is his complete dedication to pretending everything is just gonna be fine. One of the main things in this chapter is Ralsei being frustrated with Flowery because he's just going to pretend the entire time that faking it until he makes it is going to work. And I believe, that parallels Rudy to a T. Rudy is sick and probably dying, but he is unable to accept that, and so he is just pretending like everything is still fine. This leads into one of the first things that these flower connections can tell us, other than the character's relationship with Asgore. In the case of Rudy, we already kind of know Rudy's relationship with Asgore, but this will be more interesting as we see some of the other flowers. But Flowery can tell us what Rudy doesn't have, because the flowers are all appearances, right? Flowery is pretending to be determined, pretending to have control, but he doesn't. Seth is pretending they are incredibly smart, but in fact they really aren't. Aqua isn't patient, and other than maybe Green, who definitely seems kind, all the other flowers are similarly flawed in some way in terms of the aspect that they represent. And these are the aspects from the colored souls from Undertale. In the words of the broken scarf, formerly the flowery scarf, which you can get from beating the secret boss and paying 1 coin for it from Flowery, it was all just for show. The next most obvious comparison is Aqua and Kris. Not only are they both cyan with red accents, Kris also had the red-horned headband in the past, whereas Aqua has this red ribbon on her head, and the two are associated with knives and like playing games, which we know Kris used to like to do as a child. The Aqua knife, which is the item you can get after beating the secret boss from Aqua, prompts Noel to say it is nostalgic. Now, of the people she used to know when she was younger, really the only one that makes sense to have a knife be nostalgic of would be Kris. Similarly, Susie says the blade is Kris size, and so that all ties in with Aqua and Kris being parallels in the narrative. Her relationship with Asgore revolves around playing, probably because Kris was so young when Asgore was busy with work. I'm going to assume that Asgore didn't have time to play with Kris, and that almost kind of explains Kris's personality as a child of constantly trying to get into trouble. They were attention-seeking because people weren't paying attention to them. Seth being Azrael is maybe the bigger stretch of this video. I don't think any of these other ones are as much of a stretch as this, but There is the Seth Specs, which is the item you get from Seth after beating the secret boss, or you can anyway. It prompts Noel to say, "That's too much like," when attempting to equip it to her. Again, who would this be too much like? She doesn't really know any characters with giant glasses. Sure, there's Birdly, but Birdly's glasses are very square, which makes me believe that this is a reference to Asriel in the past wearing these giant glasses, because Ralsei wears giant circular glasses. Asriel is known for a couple things in the narrative so far. One is leaving hometown. So from Asgore's point of view, you could say that he sees Asriel as lacking in perseverance because he left when everyone else stayed behind. And that is something important to note. Where would these flowers get these character traits from? Why would they act a little bit like the Dreamer Holiday family members? Well, Flowery literally tells us that their dreams each come from Asgore telling them stories. I mean, Asgore's the only person they basically have ever had interaction with. All of these characters are essentially filtered through Asgore's point of view. The other reason I could see for Asriel lacking perseverance is that Asriel has this whole golden boy persona going on. And what I mean by that is he was constantly trying to be the best at everything. Instead of sticking with one thing and working hard at getting better at it, Asriel was doing a little bit of everything. He was playing in a band, he was on the track team, he was getting good grades. He was popular, so he had this whole social angle going on as well. It seemed like Asriel was trying to be a jack of all trades. And one of the reasons for that, based on the way Seth interacts with Asgore, is it's clear that Seth wants Asgore's attention. I mean, Asriel and Asgore being close that makes a lot of sense. The two are quite similar. And so the idea that at some point Asgore stops really having time to hang out with Asriel, and while Kris never really had that chance, and so sort of developed this attention-seeking behavior, Asriel felt as if he wasn't good enough, and tried to continuously be better so that he was deserving of the attention. That also makes a lot of sense to me. Then there's Orange. So Orange represents Noel, who lacks bravery. This one is kind of a hole-in-one. Not only is Orange a mouse, which we know from Chapter 2 Noel used to be afraid of, but Orange also runs to her big sis when she's being bullied, something that Noel used to do with Des all the time. Now, what we can read into with her relationship with Asgore is maybe that she's sort of acting as like an intermediary between the children and the parents. Orange wants to make sure that no one will get in Asgore's way, and also to protect him. We know that Noel wants to get strong from the weird route. But also she has this relationship with Carol where she feels unable to contact her for any reason. Sort of similar to this, no one will get in your way, I'll just let you work. Now Green feels like the odd one out, right? Who from the family could Green represent? Well, what if I told you it was Carol? Because Carol lacks kindness. Similar to Green, Carol also is always asking Asgore for owed money. Also similar, Green's relationship with Asgore revolves around cooking, and we know that Carol cooks Noel's every meal once again from the weird route. She's too afraid that Noel will burn herself. And I do think that Carol's controlling personality comes from a place of kindness. She doesn't want anything bad to happen to anyone ever again. And so she's basically psychologically torturing Noel for the sake of making sure she's never in any danger at all. But is there any proof that Carol and Asgore have some sort of relationship revolving around cooking? Well, other than the snack tray in Chapter 4, which Asgore eats, there is these lines I found that are very explicitly about this situation. In the bathroom in Chapter 4, we can overhear Asgore having a conversation with himself. For a moment, he gets distracted and says, "I wonder if the kitchen has any treats for me." But he instantly shuts himself down and says, "No, not now. I can't afford to take a break. Now more than ever, I need to concentrate, to settle this once and for all." So in other words, who would have left sweet treats in the kitchen? That would have been Carol, most likely. I mean, Rudy's in the hospital, Noel isn't allowed to cook. And so Carol and Asgore do have a relationship revolving around treats. It's just, not very important to the overall narrative, because why would it be? These lines also feed into Yellow, who I believe represents Asgore himself. After all, the yellow element in Undertale represents justice, and Asgore is someone who can no longer enact justice because he got fired from the police force. I believe that yellow quite literally represents Asgore oppressing his own self, his desire for flights of fancy, and his fun-loving personality. Also, the whole, self-flagellation part of Yellow's character does seem to fit with Asgore and his determination to clear his name, so that makes sense too. Which just leaves Blue, who I believe represents Toriel, who lacks integrity. Integrity is probably the least, obvious of the traits, so just so we're all on the same page, integrity is defined as a congruity between your morals and your actions. In the same way that Blue is all about, kindness and being good to each other and love, Blue also steals things. That's like his toxic trait, I guess. Similarly, Toriel is all about compassion and understanding and being good to people, but she has a really hard time understanding Kris, and is constantly, accidentally kind of putting them down and allowing them to sort of hurt themselves. Oh, it's fine. Kris just does this sometimes. They go into the bathroom for a really long time and I don't see them. And then there's the situation in Chapter 4 where, of course, Kris and Susie not only get locked out of the house because Toriel was hanging out at the store, but they're worried about her all day and it turns out she was fine. Another parallel is that Blue's major trait is dancing, and that's how he and Asgore interact in the Dark World. Toriel mentions at the end of Chapter 4 that she has not danced the jitterbug like this in ages, perhaps since Asgore left, and therefore the idea that Toriel and Asgore's relationship could have some element of dancing to it isn't completely unfounded. Okay, but what was the point of all of this? It's kind of cool that these characters relate to each other, and it maybe tells us something about their relationships with Asgore and the type of people they used to be, perhaps. But it's not really a theory, right? Where does the theory part come in? Well, there's still one family member who is unaccounted for, and that would be Des. Of course, there are only 7 flowers, and if Asgore is getting representation among the flowers, that means Des is left out. And that makes sense. I mean, she's lost. The fact that Asgore doesn't have time for anybody anymore is a direct result of her disappearance. Or is she unrepresented? Because there is an 8th flower, technically, Orange's big sister. And remember, Orange is representative of Noel, and therefore Des is likely mirrored by Pink. So the reason I have this laid out in this way is think about Chapter 5 as you were playing it. Flowery is interspersed in the entire chapter, constantly doting over Asgore. Green and Orange are often seen together, at least their introductions are together, more or less. Blue and Yellow are quite often seen together, and in the final battle they are paired together. Aqua and Seth are paired together a lot. And then, like I was saying, Orange and Pink are sisters. And so the flowers kind of hang out in the same way you'd expect the Holiday Dreamer family to hang out. The only strange part is that Orange doesn't hang out with Seth and Aqua. So let's talk about Pink. If Pink and Des are parallels, we need to understand Pink to perhaps better understand Des. One of the main traits of the Pink boss fight is the idea of a Lightener and a Darkener sharing a body. Given that Des is probably the Knight, and the Knight seems to have something weird going on with them, that could be evidence that perhaps Des is a fusion of a Lightener and a Darkener in some way. The other major factor in Pink's character is this desire to be something else, to change yourself. And I did a video on the idea of Des wanting to be human, and I think there's some lines that Pink has that might support that idea. But most of all, and what is most important to me in this video, is what does pink mean? We already know pink is an important color in Deltarune. After all, Friend has pink and yellow eyes. This chapter was the field of pink and gold. All of the other colors we've talked about so far are associated with a soul trait, so we can kind of understand what they might represent in the story. Pink is not. The only thing pink was associated with in Undertale was an alternative color for the spare button. So I'm going to give you one possible answer, the one that makes the most sense to me. But again, it might not be true. I mean, I looked up pink in Deltarune and all of its usages. Other than stuff that alludes to friend, there isn't really anything consequential. Probably the most important usage of pink is in the Chapter 3 Egg Room, Man Country, where one of the 7 flying aces mentions that copies are monochrome, but you colored us in with care. Maybe the pink ace was suspicious. But I think that's just meant to imply that pink is like an odd one out color, that all of the other colors that we're going to see already have some sort of meaning assigned to them, except for pink. Pink is the odd one out. So here is my pitch, alright? I'm going to present to you the idea that pink represents love, both in the literal affection definition of love and the Undertale-ass level of violence definition of love. Now, why do I have Susie and Des here alongside Pink? Well, Susie is the second hero as far as we understand the prophecy, and love finds its way to the girl in the prophecy. That associates Susie with the concept of love. Similarly, Des, through her reflection in Pink, is associated with love then as well. And the Pink boss fight is about this dichotomy. Pink, the Darkner body, is all about literal affection, love, going on dates. Pink, the Lightner ghost, is all about violence. I'm gonna kill you. I don't want to be open with my feelings. And really, I think this sort of underscores the basic moral mechanics of Susie's character. She is a character defined by the struggle within her between the desire for affection and the pull to violence. I mean, that was basically her entire arc in Chapter 1. And I think there's decent enough evidence to presume that Des could have been the same. We know that Des was deeply in love with Asriel, but we also know that she used to hit Kris on the head with her wiffle bat, that her room is full of violent comic books, paintballs, and a cracked hockey mask. Paintballs and hockey is a contact sport. There's a bunch of items on the side of the room that look very expensive and very dented. And so I believe that Des does have a pretty decent background in being, just like Susie, torn between the two definitions of love. And I find it really interesting that in Chapter 4, the violent tormentor learned to heal, and now in Chapter 5, the soft, cuddly boy is learning how to fight. Like, not literally, Ralsei was able to fight before, but Ralsei was purposefully holding back. And I find it interesting that we're sort of bringing these two that are on polar opposites somewhere towards the middle. Because remember how Pink's boss fight ends. It is with a fusion of these two ideas. Only by using both can Pink become whole. And it reminds me a lot of this line from Chapter 1. Right after you beat King, you get this conversation between Ralsei and Susie that goes like this. Ralsei says, "I was foolish to think we could act so soft to everyone. This isn't a world where kindness always wins, is it?" Susie replies, "Yeah, it's complicated. Yeah, sometimes there's people you just gotta fight. But if you never let your guard down, then you might just hurt someone you care about, too." And this makes me think about Deltarune only having one ending. Unlike Undertale, where you could go full no mercy killing everyone, or full pacifist affection for everyone, Deltarune only has one ending, which sort of necessarily would have to be then a neutral ending. A fusion of both. And that's the end of this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm gonna have more of these videos coming out eventually. And let me know what you thought in the comments below. That's it. I finally finished this video. It took a while. I hope it was worth the wait.